Warning: this is an adapted crime documentary based on real events. The following content may be too scary or disturbing. Continue if you dare. This is horror stories to sleep, or not. In the annals of criminal history, few tales are as chilling and morally disturbing as the case of William Burke and William Hare. Known infamously as the body merchants of Edinburgh, these men committed a string of murders in the early 19th century, not for pleasure, not for vengeance, but for profit. Their crimes were driven by the lucrative demand for fresh cadavers, sought by medical schools desperate to advance the understanding of human anatomy. This documentary delves into the disturbing world of Burke and Hare, tracing the historical context, the chilling sequence of crimes, and the legacy of terror they left behind. The early 1800s in Edinburgh was a period of immense scientific progress. The city had become a center for medical education, with students traveling from all over Europe to learn anatomy and surgery. However, these advancements came with a dark obstacle: a chronic shortage of cadavers for dissection. At the time, the only legally available bodies were those of executed criminals, and executions were infrequent. The demand for bodies far outstripped the supply, creating fertile ground for a shadow economy of resurrectionists, grave robbers who supplied corpses to medical schools. These grave robbers dug up coffins under the cover of night, selling whatever bodies they could find to eager anatomists. Families were horrified by the desecration of graves, and in response, they began to guard cemeteries, build high walls, and install iron cages over fresh burials, known as mortsafes. Despite these efforts, bodies continued to vanish. The atmosphere of fear and distrust in Edinburgh was palpable. Death was not only a tragedy but also a vulnerability. Even in the grave, one was not safe. It was in this grim environment, where science demanded cadavers and criminals provided them, that Burke and Hare emerged. They did not begin as murderers, but the lucrative trade soon corrupted them, pushing them beyond grave robbing into a far darker enterprise. William Burke, born in 1792 in County Tyrone, Ireland, came from a humble background. After leaving his wife and 2 children in Ireland, he migrated to Scotland, working as a laborer on the Union Canal. Charismatic and sociable, he integrated easily into the working-class communities of Edinburgh. William Hare, also from Ireland, was harsher in demeanor, often described as cunning but crude. He lived in the Westport district with his partner, Margaret Laird, running a small, shabby lodging house. The establishment catered to laborers and the poor, a place where transience and anonymity made disappearances easy to ignore. The 2 men met in Edinburgh and forged a partnership based on greed and moral disregard. Their turning point came in 1827, when a tenant in Hare's lodging house, Donald, died of natural causes, still owing £4 in rent. Rather than lose money on burial costs, Hare proposed selling the body to an anatomist. Together, he and Burke smuggled the corpse to Dr. Robert Knox at Surgeons Square. Knox paid handsomely, no questions asked. For Burke and Hare, the message was clear: the dead could be transformed into cash. The first murder was almost accidental, born from convenience and greed. Another tenant fell ill, and rather than risk losing rent, the men decided to hasten his death. They smothered him, ensuring no visible marks of violence. The method was so efficient and discreet that it became their signature, later known as burking. Knox once again accepted the body without hesitation, and Burke and Hare realized they had discovered a business model more profitable than any labor job they could secure. Burking involved pinning a victim down while covering the nose and mouth, silently suffocating them. The technique left bodies free of trauma, making them appear ideal for dissection. This made it nearly impossible to prove foul play, especially in an era before modern forensic science. The killing spree. Over the following year, Burke and Hare embarked on a killing spree that claimed at least 16 lives. Some historians argue the number could have been even higher. Their victims were almost always the marginalized, the homeless, prostitutes, traveling laborers, and others whose disappearances would not immediately raise alarm. Alcohol was their weapon of choice to incapacitate, and the lodging house became the stage for their atrocities. Among their most infamous victims was Mary Patterson, a young woman of striking beauty. When her body arrived at Knox's dissecting rooms, students recognized her, sparking whispers and unease. Knox ordered the dissection to proceed quickly, eager to erase evidence of identity. Then came Daft Jamie Wilson, a disabled youth well known in the community. His disappearance could not be ignored, and when his recognizable features appeared on the dissecting table, outrage erupted. Yet Knox pressed forward, determined to silence dissent. Other victims included women lured from taverns, beggars desperate for shelter, and men who had simply crossed paths with the killers. The murders became so routine that the killers grew careless, emboldened by greed and the complacency of the medical establishment. The role of Dr. Knoxdr. Robert Knox was one of the most celebrated anatomists of his time, drawing hundreds of students eager to study anatomy in his lectures. Yet his ambition blinded him to the suspiciously fresh corpses delivered by Burke and Hare. Many arrived still warm, and yet he asked no questions. Though he denied any knowledge of the murders, public opinion turned against him. The scandal destroyed his reputation. Knox was never charged, but his name became forever linked with the blood trade, a cautionary tale of scientific ambition unchecked by ethics. The fall Burke and Hare's undoing came with the murder of Margaret Docherty in November 1828. Unlike their other victims, Docherty was not an anonymous vagrant but a woman with connections in the Irish community. After her death, her body was discovered hidden under a bed in the lodging house. Alarmed tenants informed the police, who quickly unraveled the extent of the crimes. Arrests followed, and the walls of silence around their grim trade collapsed. To secure a conviction, the Crown offered Hare immunity in exchange for his testimony. His betrayal was swift. In court, Hare described their methods in chilling detail, exposing Burke as the principal perpetrator. The evidence, combined with Hare's testimony, sealed Burke's fate. The trial and execution. Burke's trial in December 1828 was a sensation, drawing massive crowds and dominating newspapers. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to death by hanging. On January 28, 1829, thousands assembled to witness his execution. The air was thick with both fury and fascination, as the city confronted the man who had turned human lives into commodities. In a grim twist of poetic justice, Burke's body was dissected at the University of Edinburgh, before a crowd of eager students. His skeleton was preserved, his death mask created, and fragments of his skin even turned into macabre souvenirs. To this day, his skeleton remains on display, a chilling reminder of his crimes. Hare, meanwhile, was released after his testimony. Reviled by the public, he vanished into obscurity. Some accounts suggest he was attacked and blinded, while others claim he fled south. His ultimate fate remains a mystery, but his name lives on as one half of Scotland's most infamous duo. Legacy and impact. The Burke and Hare murders forced a reckoning in British society. Outrage over the killings and Knox's complicity led to the Anatomy Act of 1832, which allowed medical schools legal access to unclaimed bodies, putting an end to grave robbing and diminishing the market for illicit corpses. It was a necessary reform but came too late for the victims who had been sold to science. Culturally, the story endured in songs, ballads, and plays. The term burking entered the English language as a synonym for suffocation. Even today, Burke and Hare are remembered not just as killers but as symbols of the dark intersection of greed, poverty, and unrestrained scientific ambition. Their crimes remain a case study in how systemic failures and human depravity can converge to produce atrocities. Legacy and impact. The Burke and Hare murders forced a reckoning in British society. Outrage over the killings and Knox's complicity led to the Anatomy Act of 1832, which allowed medical schools legal access to unclaimed bodies, putting an end to grave robbing and diminishing the market for illicit corpses. It was a necessary reform but came too late for the victims who had been sold to science. Culturally, the story endured in songs, ballads, and plays. The term burking entered the English language as a synonym for suffocation. Even today, Burke and Hare are remembered not just as killers but as symbols of the dark intersection of greed, poverty, and unrestrained scientific ambition. Their crimes remain a case study in how systemic failures and human depravity can converge to produce atrocities.